Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Jens Heitland Show, where I interview experts from different fields to connect the dots of innovation and entrepreneurship. Today's guest is the founder of Take Pride Today. He's best-selling author of Retail Pride. He's celebrated as the top 100 global retail influencer. Please welcome to the show, Ron Thurston. Hey, Ron, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm fantastic. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy that you have the time. It's really awesome. I look forward to it a long while already.
A long while. We've been in conversation for quite a while to make this happen.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we're both too busy.
I don't know if you can be too busy to, have good conversations with friends. That's what I would call it.
No, agreed. Let's say it's the time zones.
That's true too. Yeah.
Good. So before we go into retail, into all your expertise and bringing a flavor of innovation into this, tell us a little about yourself. Like, who are you? What is the story of Ron?
Oh, thank you. So I am a California guy at heart. So I'm a fourth generation Californian, and I grew up in Lake Tahoe, which is a gorgeous part of this country if you've never seen it. And I came from a family of construction who built grocery stores. I know your background is IKEA, so they weren't quite IKEA size, but grocery stores are, a complex beast upon themselves. But my path was not to be in the kind of family construction business. I had, my grandfather led the company as a CEO. And so I learned a lot about leadership, but my grandmother owned a fabric store in Tahoe and taught me about how to sew and fabric. And I just knew at a young age, at some point, there would be this merging of these worlds of like leadership and fashion and people and the way that he led. And little did I know that I would spend the next 3 decades working in fashion and leadership and design and retail and wholesale and buying. And I just knew I had to work in this industry. And so I had some early success as a fashion designer. That's what I studied in school. But I discovered retail, 5-7 years into my adult career. And I just fell in love with this industry because it is so entrepreneurial, so inspiring, so engaging. The brands are doing interesting things all the time. There are new ideas always coming up. The idea of how you lead teams in retail is an art in itself, and it's just I have such passion for it. And I've had the pleasure and the honor to work for some of this country's biggest brands, starting my career at Gap. And even within Gap, I ran Banana Republic stores, I ran outlet stores, I ran visual merchandising for the US for Gap. So I did a lot of different jobs, but then went on to help start brands like West Elm, from your kind of furniture world. Went in to lead Apple stores, and this was helped launch iPhone 2 and iPad and MacBook Air. I launched those products, and then went on to lead Tory Burch from the West Coast, and then moved here to New York, helped start Bonobos as the men's guide shop business model, ran Saint Laurent from Paris, one of the most important luxury houses in the world, and spent the last 3.5 years running Intermix, which was the largest multi-brand women's retailer in the country. And so my expertise is really around people and culture and retail and celebrating that work, because what I have sold in my career has run the gamut from entry price point to the highest end of luxury. And for me, we all do a similar job. We all have similar competencies. We're just selling different product. Mm-hmm. And that I find so inspiring every day.
Incredible story. But you haven't started on the top. It's like you're like myself as well. You started with real work. That sounds always bad, but it's kind of like learning the business through doing it. So
right?
how was that? How did it start in a store environment? So you said designer, but how did you get into your first
Yeah.
real retail job?
So I started at a department store in California called the Broadway, which you would align. It was eventually bought by Macy's. So you would think of it as a Macy's. And they had a management training program. So they would say, you know, do you want to be a buyer? Do you want to work in accounting, finance, stores? What do you want to do? And so they had a rotation program. And I quickly learned, like, I want to be in the store. I want to run a department in the store. And I didn't enjoy it all being in the office. I wanted to work on the sales floor. And that's how it started. And so I also pretty quickly figured out that department store was not going to be my future. It was, you know, it's interesting and you learn how it works. But I knew specialty, and that's when I actually joined Gap Kids as my first role, and you know, assistant manager in a very low volume store, and did great work. Well, wow, that guy looks like he knows what he's doing. Let's give him his own store. Oh, and then like a year into it, let's give him a district manager role and give him 10 stores, and then give him more stores. And so I did. You're right. I did the work. I've done every job, and I think it's an important place to sit as a leader, that you understand the work and you understand the challenges of it and how to inspire others, because you give yourself credibility. The fact that, like, I've done it. I've opened hundreds of stores. I've done all kinds of that work, and that's how you inspire others.
Yeah, and it's in today's time. Sometimes it's really like you get people on the top who have never worked inside the business, and that's for me always like a little, if not a bigger red flag.
Right.
Because for me, it's really like you said, you need to understand, and that's specifically from a leadership perspective, you need to understand what is the day-to-day life of a retail person inside a store. If you don't know that they're grinding on Saturdays or have this and that complications, you just say, hey, you're not reaching your numbers.
Right. Just do better, you know, with no understanding of like how to get there. And, you know, retail at its core is really a self-taught business. You know, I did study a little bit of it, but the experience comes from doing the work. There's no replacement for doing the work. And so I actually think people who have had a career in stores like I have are very sensitive to people that don't understand the language and don't understand how it works. And by language, I just mean, you know, the inside, not the actual words you use, but the inside part of it. And like really appreciating the hard work and effort that goes into this business. And I think there's a sensitivity from stores to senior executives that they don't really understand it. And I've always been that guy of like, come with me on a store visit. Like, hey, let's go to the West Coast. Let's visit stores. I'll be there on Saturday. Why don't you pop by? You know, I've always been that one that tried to get more of the office in the store, because then it's like, oh, now I understand. Now I understand why they needed this, or the questions that they ask. Because if you don't grow up in stores, actually, you don't really understand it.
Yeah. And that's, for me, I still understand a tiny bit, but I also appreciated like learning from the experienced salespeople. It's like if we take IKEA as an example, where it's like we followed people. It's slightly larger store environments, like with a piece of paper and then drawing where it's like, where do they stop? What is the hot spot? All these tiny things. And then the experienced person came as like, just to change this sofa, like 45 degrees angle, and it will be different. It's like, no way. No way. Yeah, watch it. And then we did it again. It's like crazy. How much granularity as well is in, if you do it right. Because it's like a lot of people think, and maybe some brands are like this, I don't know. It's like one concept and copy paste everywhere. It looks and feels the same, but it's not if you run it well.
Correct. It's not. And you're right. The perception may be the same. The brand may look and feel the same, but the actual infrastructure of how it's all built should be really unique. And I actually think the idea of very unique kind of retail models and retail formats that are special to that market, that city, are even more important today. I think the customer likes this idea of community and curation, and that it's, you understand me as your local customer and you built something that was for me. That has never been more important.
Yeah. As we're already in retail, you're one of the thought leaders on saying retail is one of the best career choices for young people. Yeah. How did you get to that conclusion?
It's really through all of the people that I've hired, probably interviewed thousands, hired hundreds, if not thousands, opened so many stores. There's this kind of sense of an accidental career. So when I wrote my book, and I decided, which came out October 2020, and I decided I'm going to call it Retail Pride, but because this is such a proud industry. But the idea that it's often accidental. I have a very high percentage of people that would sit down in front of me for an interview. They would say, oh, well, I kind of fell into this by accident. I worked on it part-time while I was in college, and I really fell in love with it. I had a good boss. I worked for a good brand. And so I thought back and just continued to hear this again and again. And you think, I appreciate that you say it's accidental, but a young person can then say, I have unlimited opportunities in retail to create a career for myself, a financial stability, be inspired and led in ways that are so open, that retail is an industry that's open to all. No matter how you identify, no matter what you want to do, retail is so enormous that all the jobs are right there in front of you. And so there aren't a lot of industries that would say, you can do whatever you want. You don't actually have to have a specific education, but you have to do the work to have that career. And that is very unique to our business. I didn't say you have to have studied at this university or only have 4-year degrees. I'm like, you have the personality and you have the energy and you have the drive and you have the love of what you're going to sell, and you're ready to take on this challenge. Like, let's go. I'll hire you today. Let's do this together. Not many industries could say that. Restaurants can't really say that. Retail is that one where you can just come in and make a difference tomorrow.
Yeah. It's quite interesting. I talked to a young person today, and she was saying, she's just applying after studying for jobs and so on. She was saying, everyone is looking only at the grades. It's like, what does it say about myself if I've had like this grade in math and this in literature or whatever? Is like, it's not much. And I was then telling her how I hired people, where I said I didn't even watch at that stuff, because for me it was not important. For me it was important, like understanding who you are as a person, and if you fit into the team. It's like more this part, and your motivations and deep motivations as a person, rather than surface level. How was that? How is it for you?
It's the same. It's the same. And I'll usually sit with someone and just kind of ask them to tell me their story. And, just similar like what you did. But actually, many people struggle with that question, because they'll always start, well, I went to school here and I studied this. I'm like, no, like, what do you love? What gets you up? Like, what do you look forward to? What's been the best experience you've had? Who's been the best boss that you've had? And like, what brought you here today? And then from there, you can dig a little further of like, well, then how did that translate into your career? Where did you have the most success and why? Where did you feel like you actually weren't that successful? And can you identify, like, culturally, like, what made you feel great? And even for myself, once I figured out, I actually really thrive in that kind of entrepreneurial spirit of like, I don't want it to just be like the corporate planogram. You just do it this way. Don't ask a lot of questions, just do it. I don't personally thrive in that environment, but some people do. So know what gets you going. And then from there, your personality in this business is what motivates you and builds your success. And if you can't start the conversation with like great storytelling or being able to engage literally in like, I expect someone to be able to have a comfortable conversation in 90 seconds. Because in retail, you meet strangers all day. That's what you do. You talk to strangers. And if you're constantly awkward and nervous about it, you're actually not going to win. I love this idea of like, I could just be in a store, someone says hello, and you strike up a conversation and you learn something about them. And that's not a skill everyone has. But in retail, if you have that skill, and passion for it, your likelihood of being successful is pretty high.
Yeah. And it for me, it starts with being interested in the other person. And then you can learn different techniques, how to do this better and better and better over time. But for me, it's always, you need to be like we talked before recording, is like, how can you help someone else? If you put that as a first priority, not how can I sell now this or that. I think that's the key ingredient for me, at least, which helps you to be successful in that.
Agreed. And if you come from, kind of the mindset place of, particularly as you work in higher price point industries, that your responsibility is to represent the brand, and for that person that has come in to feel welcome, to feel honored and respected, and to potentially learn something about what it is that this brand represents. And I think back to my time even running Apple stores, and this was early, the iPhone had not taken over our lives at that point. So the idea of it was new and interesting, but very expensive. And same, like we called people, like most people had PCs at the time, that we called them switchers to Mac, but same, it was a big financial investment. Yeah. But more often than not, it was about just educating and inspiring of like, this is what an iPhone is. They may not have been able to afford it, but they left feeling welcome. And it's like, wow, I really want that. The guys in there were really nice. I want to come back, and when I'm ready, I will. And same, like leading Saint Laurent, it's a brand that is the price point's really high. And to ensure that everyone felt welcome and engaged and could then learn about the brand, the history of Saint Laurent, without ever making a purchase, is, I think, an important component to our industry.
We'd like to dive a little bit into innovation. Yeah. So what have you seen from an innovation perspective and experienced as well over the last decades on how is innovation moving inside of retail, and how you experienced it or led it as well as a leader in organizations?
So I think there's a lot of innovation on the tech side, which I can certainly speak to, but on the human side, the evolution, I think, is how we are treating retail as a career, and that there's a lot of continued investment in training, development, whether it's in diversity and inclusion training, whether that is in more deep-rooted coaching skills, really learning great leadership. I think that is an innovation that continues to be a great investment. And some brands are doing it really well. Others have some room to catch up. But I do see that investment continuing. I think on the tech side, the growth of e-commerce inherently brings new ideas. But then you think about things in store, like chat from websites to in-store associates, from buy online, pick up in store, has really changed the conversation for a lot of brands about how they engage. Mobile checkout, contactless pay. It's a great evolution, because then you don't have to spend 100 of your square feet building this giant cash wrap in the middle of the floor, which was very traditional. Instead, everyone has mobile POS, and everyone can engage, and you can find inventory on your mobile phone. You can probably check your schedule. So you've got everything that you need on your iPhone, and then the store doesn't have to have all of this other infrastructure. Yeah. I think how we track, there's a lot of innovation in how you track behavior in store, with kind of through video monitoring, where are they going, how long do they spend in each part of the store, which kinds of clients are more likely to convert based on their behavior. There's a lot of that happening in innovation, which I find fascinating. But at the end of the day, like, that great human engagement is like, it's the kind of oldest part of who we are, like how we move as a tribe. I never forget like that value that comes from your ability to just connect with someone else.
Yeah, I was about to ask a follow-up question, which went into that direction, which kind of, so what do you believe is the biggest investment opportunity from an innovation perspective inside the retail organization?
I think it's that investment in the in-store teams to make sure that they are as fully engaged, trained, have everything more likely at their fingertips, the better. So we're all so used to our phone. If you can provide everything I need as an employee on the same device I use personally and professionally, from all back of house operations, inventory management, mobile POS, chat functions, clienteling functions, if I can do all of that in one place, which is new, then you're going to win. If store associates have to do half of it manually, and then you're doing something else from a POS perspective, and I can't have my phone on the floor, and I can't have access to live inventory. If I don't have any of those things, it doesn't create a very good environment for the store team. So that innovation comes, I think, internally first versus what the customer sees. Because if you've enabled all of that in-store technology, they're going to be really happy and proud to work for that brand. And then the service gets better, and then your business gets better. It all goes hand in hand.
Yeah. It's when you enable the team, they can focus on the customer. They don't need to take care that the cash register or whatever is not working, or the counting didn't work out. And there's like, oh yeah, we should have that item in the store, but it's not there. This kind of small things, but in the end, it's all taking attention away from the interaction with the customer.
I completely agree. Yeah, and those frustration points and those pain points lead to the continued like high turnover rates and continued frustration about working in our industry. And so when you make that investment in your own in-store people first, then those conversations slow down, and then you can really talk about business. Really talk about investing and career management and additional training. But you need a stable, proud workforce before you can do any of those things. And I think we jump immediately off into the top and say, I want 10% of the people to be promoted to the next level, in 2021. Well, maybe it should be 30. And if it can't be 30, why? Is it because everyone's worked here less than 3 years? Like, what is the root challenge of that? Don't just set a goal. Say, well, maybe we should invest more in people, and then the actual growth of careers becomes more naturally. I find this topic fascinating, actually.
I would like to get us into a new topic, which is networking and the power of networking, because we're thinking similar in this topic, but I would like to take a little bit the retail part of that. So how do you see networking, because that might not be normal for a store person, as an important part, as well as a career opportunity and so on. So taking it high level, and then we can dig deeper.
Yeah. I mean, high level, one of the greatest advantages of the last couple of years is that we have access to people that we've never had before. So you see them on, video versions of podcasts. You see them on webinars, on virtual speaking engagements. So you can understand someone's point of view pretty clearly through many different social channels, whether it's in Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, podcast, whatever version that you spend the most time on, you have access to these people, and you understand more about their brand and who they are, what they're doing. And I find that's never been so available today.
Yeah.
So people that are just starting out in their careers, you would say, well, based on what you've learned, who do you want to work for now? Like, where do you want to go? And what do you want to do? And you don't have to then box yourself in based on what you think you've heard. Actually, go find the leaders of that company speaking somewhere.
Yeah.
Then you'll say, oh, I love what they had to say. I want to work there. I love what that guy had to say, and what she's planning for the future of that brand. And that's how I look at it at a very kind of high level of like, we're all out there. We're all doing more.
Yeah. It's funny that you said it. I'm even doing this with clients. Like when I have client interactions, like opportunities coming up, I check them out on YouTube or wherever they are with the video, because you get a sense and the feel of what that person is and how they are. And then you can, of course, engage with them in a different way if you wouldn't see them on video.
Correct. And even I think of, the overall retail industry is the best candidates. So younger people, maybe just coming out of university, or maybe been doing this for a few years, the best candidates are highly educated about what's happening in the industry. So maybe your brand hasn't used that technology yet, but you understand how it works. Maybe your brand hasn't been able to invest in some of the training platforms, but as a candidate and as someone in their career, do your homework and just know what's happening at a large scale first. And I think I can speak for myself, as in retail, we tend to get trapped in like the brand we work for and our blinders on to what's happening everywhere else in the world. I did the same thing of like, well, we wouldn't use that here, so I don't need to know about it. And I had to catch myself of like, I can't keep doing this.
And it's so easy. All this information, like you said, is on your fingertips. Like 90 or let's say 80% is available free. You don't need to pay for a course, nothing. It's like there's so much information there. So I always say to people, it's like, if you pay for a course, then it needs to be good curated and bring you like faster to the knowledge. And that's a good curated course where I would personally as well pay for, if that's a topic I'm interested in. But there's so much out there that you can pick and choose what you like and build your own menu to learn from.
I agree.
Stay up to date.
And you're right. And you and I are both really active on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's full of information. But from their own courses, which I know there's a bit of a charge for some of those, but those are great. But more importantly, it's like, follow the people that you think are doing interesting work. And more often than not, they're posting, I mean, you and I do, about what we're doing, what we're saying, and then they can find us. I mean, it's all available. It's all out there. And then reach out and just say hello.
And it's funny that you say it's on one hand, it's doing a lot of people do it, but it's everyone thinks, I can't text to Ron. I mean, he will never answer. He's the most busy person on earth. But in the end, it's like I did a test a couple of weeks where I put my WhatsApp number public. So I did it for 4 weeks. How many people texted me on my public, available, visible WhatsApp number? What do you think?
I would say mine's visible as well. I'd say less than 5.
Yeah.
I know.
And now it's picking up because I still have it in Instagram and people see it more. But I was thinking like, holy crap, I shouldn't do it, but I will do it. And it's like almost nobody in the beginning. They don't.
It's I have a chat function on my website that says, text me with what you think about Retail Pride. And I do get messages on there, but it's not as if my phone is constantly blowing up. And so, but I would say if you work in this industry and you're looking for inspiration, take advantage of the people that are putting themselves out there, like the two of us. And, just engage in whatever way that works for you. And I know it can be scary and intimidating, and you're not always going to get a yes, but it never hurts if you don't. You'll never go anywhere if you don't start. And
I've had a good example. Someone reached out to me. That was, I think, on LinkedIn. if he can be an intern of my business.
Uh-huh.
I said, I don't have a space right now, but it's like, I have a network of companies I work with, but there's something where we could engage and let's figure it out. And today he was on a roundtable discussion where we have a retail executive, which we know together, Stephen. He was asking a question on how does retail work with the young people, Gen Z. And it was a panel of young thinkers who are discussing these topics. And one of these guys was the guy who asked me about an internship.
I love it.
So,
did he have interesting things to say on
of course,
on the panel? Yeah, I'm sure he did. Yeah.
I mean, I of course interacted with him over the last couple of months even. And it's just fascinating. I would have never found him if he wouldn't reach out. So I think these are opportunities. And I'm a nobody, but if it's like, there are so many people out there where you can just reach out, and there are always opportunities, always. And I do that myself. Like, we have never met before in person. I hope we will manage that one day. But we got connected through a friend and that's how it works today. And then it's really getting to know each other and see how you can support each other.
It's really true. So there's a woman that you've seen on LinkedIn often, April Sobral, who is also, I would consider a peer from a experience level. She also worked at Apple. She was a vice president of stores at David's Tea, and like had a really successful retail career, and started a retail training company called Retail U, based out of Canada. But she and I met in February 2020. She came to my office at Intermix, and I was still working on my book. She was working on her book, and we just knew that we had to meet each other. And now both of our books have been published, and our circles keep interacting, and they keep, crossing paths with each other, and we have similar messages. But because the industry is so big, it requires all of us to be really loud to get out there. And you're right. I think where you can find those ways for your paths to cross, make it happen. Take the risk.
When you talk about the book, let's dive into it. So before we go into what the book is about, I would love to understand, it's like, how did you get to the point of, hey, I'm writing a book, and figuring out like all of that? Tell us the story.
So when I felt like the conversation of the death of our industry got to like a boiling point, it was the major headline every day in business of fashion. I had just like reached a boiling point. This was probably like 5 years ago, of like, I have so much to say about why retail is such an important and relevant and exciting career. I'm going to start a blog. So I did start writing a blog, and I tried to understand what the audience was looking for, what they liked, what they responded to. And overwhelmingly, it was people who work in stores were really wanted someone to kind of be their voice and to celebrate them. And so I learned a lot just from writing, and I just took it all down. I was busy working. I spent just the next few years leading Intermix, and I just knew at some point I needed to put my words down on paper and say, I know that there has never been a book written about our industry that is specifically for the people who work in stores, that there are incredible books about leadership. There are great books about the industry, from a C-suite perspective. And even myself, I've put on dozens of big conferences. I'm always trying to find like the book and the inspiration, and like, who am I going to use to inspire the team? And I'm like, well, why don't we have anyone that's actually ever worked in retail being that? So I just had reached, I think it was my age. I had just turned 55. And I'm like, I need, like, at some point, the last 35 years of working, I have a lot to say. So I just did the homework and said, how can I do this? And it's certainly a journey to do it. And I'm so glad that I've done it. And now I want to do more.
How did you get to the name? I mean, you have already scratched it a little bit before, but you don't come up with that name straight away, I guess, at least. Or
you don't. So the working title was the title was say retail, the accidental career that's okay to love. I'm like, yeah, it's okay to love this. Like, stop saying, yeah, I just work in retail. Like, it's okay to love it. And then the further I got into it and working with the publisher, they're like, this is about pride. This is about being proud of what you do, proud of how you show up, proud of the industry that you work, the impact you have on customers, the team, every aspect of this. And pride is a bit of a controversial word. It's one of the 7 deadly sins. You think about, like, how do you use this word in a way that's relevant for our industry, and to say this is the guide to celebrate your accidental career. But first and foremost, you have to have pride in what you do. And that changes the conversation, because from my own perspective, the cocktail conversation, oh, what do you do? Oh, I work in retail. They're like, oh, yeah, like, I'm sorry to hear that. And I'm like, no, actually, I love working in retail.
Like,
I've sold some of the most, exactly what they would, I've sold the most beautiful product, and I've led teams who love what they do every day. You see them on LinkedIn every day, how happy they are. Pictures from store visits, posted all over social media. Like, those are proud people. And so it took me a while to settle in, but I'm like, this is about retail pride. This is about pride for an industry, the biggest industry in the US, and a pride to work in it. And so I wanted it to be, I have a copy here, like, I wanted it to be like loud and that there's no text on the back. This is actually this is a photograph that I had converted it as an art piece, that retail is an art, and retail we should be a little louder, and we should be a little more excited about what we do every day. And I love to carry this book around, because people are like, oh, it's so nice. What is that? I've been on the subway in New York City. Oh, it's my book. Like, they really, self-promotion, but they really like this idea of, like, celebrating this industry.
So what is it about? What message? I get the high level message I get, and I guess it is about that. But what is it about, and for whom is it?
Yeah, so it's kind of done into a few different big chunks. So the first chunk is, like, why is this industry important? Because the statistics around the size of it don't always get the headline news. To say that 1 in 4 people in the US have their first work in retail, and that 2 out of 6, 3 out of, nearly half of people have their first job in retail, and that it is the biggest contributor to the economy, and that it's actually not Amazon, it is brick and mortar retail that drives the industry. And so there's some kind of just fact based, and then I put in there the top 10 reasons why we love working in retail. Things like, we create joy, and we create relationships that last for decades, and that visual merchandising has never been more important, and the core of great retail happens in visual. So the kind of top 10 reasons why. And then I go into the third part, which is the pillars of retail success, which are empathy. Again, it's my own personal opinion, in the empathy, curiosity, and focus. And no matter what role you have, and whether it's brand new first part-time seasonal job, if you can really think about, how can I be more empathetic? How can I ask curious questions and learn about the industry and focus on what I'm asked to accomplish? If I do those 3 things well, whether I'm the vice president of stores or part-time seasonal, you're going to win.
Yeah, I was about to say, it doesn't matter where you are in the retail ecosystem, it's same valid for
correct
for
it doesn't. And so that was intentional, to think about what are those pillars. And then the next is around just what I call runs retail leadership, like pillars of retail leadership. So for those that are it's just starting out in the industry, learning how it works. Some things like, having an optimistic attitude, and thinking about, how you can lead with optimism, how you celebrate people around you, how to learn how to tell your story, just some pillars of retail success. And then the last part, I want to just think about what's next. What's next in our industry from a career point of view, from a culture point of view, like what are we doing to move the industry forward? And so to answer your question about who it's for anyone that works in this business. But specifically, I wrote it for people who work in stores, because they are kind of the audience that gets the least amount of attention in the world today. But I've had district managers, regional managers, heads of stores buy it for all their store teams. I've had other people in HR or corporate functions like it because it like re-inspires their love of retail. But if a store manager, assistant manager, sales, ops, when they read it, they're like, okay, this guy really understands my job. This guy understands what I do. And that for me changes everything.
Love that. And it's like you said, and that, at least for us, it was always the saying, the people on the shop floor, they're the most important people inside the retail organization.
Always.
And from a hierarchy perspective, some people will not agree. But for me, it's like they're meeting the customers, they're putting the work in, day out. When the manager, like the regional manager who is going between the stores, is sick, doesn't really matter. Correct. If a store person is sick, you have a problem.
Correct. And I've been on that side, so I understand how that, the further you get away from it, then the less impact you can have, other than making big global decisions. And so I also understand that the challenge often in stores is that they know that people in head office don't really understand their work every day. And so for me, if as a vice president of stores, the more time I can spend in the store and not just take the store manager out to lunch and don't come back, but I actually sit and like, hey, let's have a morning coffee together. Let's do a Q&A. Let's actually take the managers out of the room. Like, okay, tell me what's really going on here. Like that's how you get to the core of what's happening. And the closer you get to it, and your point, like there's nothing more important than the person standing in front of the customer and what they are going to say, and what is that impression that the customer has of your brand based on that interaction. Not how beautiful the store is, not how all the other logistics. What happens when that one associate, whomever it is, whatever level it is engaging with that customer? That's the most memorable part of retail.
Yeah. And it's 100% agree. And it's not just what they're saying, it's also how they're saying it. You feel the energy. Like, I mean, we are all customers ourselves as well. If you go into a retail store and the person you see is very tired and is not really happy about what they're doing, it's like you don't really feel talking to them. But if the person is like, hey, welcome, and here and there, it's like, oh, what's going on here? It's huge differences. You see it straight away. If a local retailer is taking this into how they interact and how the culture, like you said it already, how the culture of the team is. If they're kind of working well with you, sense it. If you're into these topics, you feel it straight away. It's like, oh, there's something wrong. They're not really interacting with each other. Or it's like, oh, hey, these guys have fun.
Yep. I mean, that, and I would just go back and use that word pride. People who are proud to work for that leader, that brand, that store, that company culture, what they sell, they're really proud to do it. They're not going to be the one that's kind of hanging behind the counter looking at their phone. They're going to be the one that's out there and said, oh my gosh, I have to tell you about my brand. Let me tell you what just came in today. Oh, you're so beautiful. I can't wait for you to try this on. Like the list is so long, but proud people who work in retail are the ones that make the most memorable impact.
Yeah. And that's so important, especially in these times where some people are still in a negative spiral.
Yeah.
I think it's even more important than ever.
Yeah.
Let's get into something happened the last month on your end, career-wise. So how did that happen? What happened?
It's what happened. So I have chosen to launch my own brand. Thank you for asking. Under the umbrella that I am calling a platform of Take Pride Today. And so this concept of, the action of taking, like owning your own experience, own the fact that I'm taking pride today in one action I'm going to have, how I'm going to show up, what I'm going to say when I have that difficult conversation. Maybe I'm going to take pride in the fact that I'm going to show up 15 minutes early, get settled, get comfortable for the day, whatever that is for you, that is unique to your own experience. If we take pride today in one thing, even, like, it really changes the game. It changes your mindset. And I'm applying it specifically in the retail world. How can we take pride today in one more customer engagement, one more team interaction, a little more effort. So for me, that's consulting, brands on how your teams show up. And, how do we create a culture of pride that energizes your business? And potentially for me, it's more books and speaking, about this really important topic of pride in retail, pride in our industry.
Yeah. Is it also like educational perspective, where how you can support local teams in different ways, or is it mainly focused on, hey, this is a total brand and you support the brand? Or
so yeah, I'm looking at it from education, potentially creating some training opportunities, like training platforms for brands to layer into what they're already doing. But I think of education in the university space, and I'm working with Parsons, New School of Design here in New York. I've spoken to many universities across the country that have retail programs, and that they need leaders, like us, who have had success, who are still encouraging this as a really important career path forward. So I think of education, not even of what I'm going to write, but how I can inspire students all over the world. And I actually really enjoy, like, big Zooms with a lot of students and to talk about retail, because they're hearing sometimes a different message from their parents, maybe, or even from their peer group. And I want to change that conversation.
I love that, because to that point is like, today is like, when you finish university, like, you need to get in one of the top companies, and it's need to be this and that industry. But retail is like not on top of the industries. And maybe some brands are, if you take Apple or Gap and so on, maybe these brands are interesting, but then that doesn't mean working in retail. That means, like, I'm working in business navigation somewhere, taking care of the money piece. But that's for me, it's, yes, part of the organization, but it's not really the retail part.
It's not. And so think about, if I'm studying fashion design, merchandising, marketing, PR, anything related that ultimately impacts a customer, the best way to learn that is to start your career in a store. You may not have plans of doing it for 10 years, but if you're a fashion designer who has not worked in retail and doesn't actually understand the core of the customer, then you're missed an opportunity to learn, well, how does that customer actually engage in the fitting room? What are they looking for? And you're going to see the need for what you need to design into based on your retail experience. So for me, there's always a reason to do it. You'll always be better at your future job because you've had some store experience.
So how do you call the business again?
Take Pride Today.
Love that. So let's get into the last part, where I'm asking a couple of rapid fire, but not so rapid fire questions. They're slightly out of context, but maybe fitting into what you're doing. So it's only 3 questions. Question number 1 is, if you would have the chance to work with a project that's impacting every human being on Earth, what project would it be, and why would you choose to work with that project?
Uh, um, hmm. I sit on the board of directors of Goodwill, and part of the mission of Goodwill is to not only provide training opportunities for people who are looking for work through the revenue stream, but there's a huge sustainability part of Goodwill about donating it, and that donations create jobs. But by donating it versus throwing your clothes away, you even just here in New York and New Jersey, it will keep 30 to 40 million pounds of clothing out of the landfills just through donations in the next 3 years to Goodwill. So I would say mine is about keeping product out of landfill and using that revenue to get people back to work. And that does impact people all over the world. Like the way that we throw away clothing and dispose of clothing all over the world has a very negative impact.
Of that. Where will you be in a year from now? And you can answer that business-wise and or personal.
So funny enough, I'm actually going to take an adventure early 2022 and live in an Airstream in the US, on campgrounds.
In an what is that?
Trailer, like an Airstream trailer.
Oh, that's awesome.
Like the big silver ones you've seen from the 50s. So that I'm going on the road in 2022. So I actually don't even know where I'm going to be. It's wherever I want to be is where I will be.
That's awesome. So you will definitely travel around the whole country.
The whole country. I want to meet retailers who are doing interesting things all over the US and hear their stories. And often those are family-led businesses or multi-generational retail businesses. I can't wait to be in those stores and speak to those people. So my husband and I are going on this like at least a year-long adventure to travel the country in a trailer.
Oh, I can already imagine how cool that will be and all the exciting stories you can tell.
I've lived in New York City now for 7 years, and this just seems like a great next step.
Yeah, you need to create a blog, vlog, whatever. I will.
Oh, I will. You will definitely see that.
Awesome. Last question from this one's, how do you keep yourself informed, up to date on the topics that interest you?
So for me, the number one platform is LinkedIn, because the stream of interesting content that comes through, I can always find what's happening or what's trending on LinkedIn. So I would say that's number one, because it comes from all different sources. So it's different than a news stream that's mixed with other things. The people that I follow then generate content that's interesting to me. But I'm also, every day it's the business of fashion and everything that's happening on the tech side. It's Women's Wear Daily. It's different ideas that I hear about from different technology companies that are happening. And then, people and culture can come from anywhere. But I'm definitely a junkie of anything that's kind of retail and tech related. For sure.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. I could talk 5 hours more, but
I know
I'm cautious about your time as well. So how can people reach out to you? How can people find you?
Yeah, thank you. So LinkedIn for sure, I'm Ron Thurston, and go to retailpride.com. And so on there, you'll find links to buy the book. You can find it on Amazon, and actually all over the world. Surprises me sometimes where I get messages from. So that's a great way to find it there. But also on retailpride.com, you'll see podcasts, including this one, webinars, speaking engagements, a blog, events, live events that I'm doing. So everything is all in one place.
Yeah, I will put it as well into the show notes so people can click through you. Through to you.
And you can text me from there, like we said earlier. There's a bubble on the bottom.
The 5 people.
Right. It's fine. I'm ready for you. Bring it on.
Ron, thank you very much for your time. It was a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for listening to today's episode. You will find the links and resources in the show notes of this episode. If you would like to support the podcast, the most impactful thing you can do is subscribing to the show on any of the podcasting platforms and give me a review. This will help me to reach more innovators around the world and bring some of you into the show. If you have any question to the guest or want to engage with me, feel free to reach out to me on my public WhatsApp at +49 151 7033 1176. I will repeat, +49 151 7033 1176. It's all WhatsApp, texting only. Or follow me on social media and contact me there. And finally, if you look for someone educating you or your team on innovation culture coaching, have a look at heitlandinnovation.com. Thanks and see you in the next episode.